LA gangster Mickey Cohen single-handedly changed the face of history in Los Angeles by corrupting police, politicians, as well as many high-ranking officials in the district attorney's office. Mickey's enemies, including some rogue police officers, rival mobsters, and even some close mobsters tied to Mickey himself, wanted him dead. Known as the celebrity gangster for his love of the camera in expensive suits, Mickey Cohen quickly attained incredible power and status in the City of Angels and was featured on more than 1,000 front pages in Los Angeles newspapers, as well as hundreds of articles in national and international newspapers and magazines. On today's show, we will take a deep dive into Los Angeles' most notorious gangster who survived 11 assassination attempts during his wild and crazy life. On this week's show, we'll be talking about notorious LA gangster Mickey Cohen. All right, guys, you guys are in for a real treat this afternoon. My guest this afternoon, BRADLEWIS, is one of the premier celebrity biographers in the business. He has written many fascinating books on celebrity, including My Father, Uncle Miltie, Great White Doctor, The Bloomingdale Code. This is the Bible, guys, for Mickey Cohen. Celebrity Gangster, The Incredible Life and Times of Mickey Cohen. Mickey Cohen, The Gangster Squad and the Mob, the true story of vice in Los Angeles from 1937 to 1950, as well as Mickey Cohen, The Rat Pack Years, The Elder Statesman, the Elder Statesman's Life and Times from 1960 to 1976, as well as his latest book, Well, Nobody's Perfect, 450s Comedies. You can check out all Bradley's books at bradleylewis.org. That's bradleylewis.org. Brad joins me this afternoon to talk about one of LA's most feared and respected gangsters, Mickey Cohen. Brad, first of all, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I hope I got that right.
Oh, that was one of the most sensational introductions I ever had. It was sensational. But you know what? You could put in bradleylewis.com.
Okay.
Just
what
to
I say?
top it off.
Oh, what I say? What I say? .org?
No, they're both.
Oh, there's two. Okay.
Thank you very much. That was a great introduction, Mike. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, Bradley. So let's try to set up the scene in LA from like the late 30s to the early 40s. What kind of mob is operating at that time, and who were the players in Los Angeles before Mickey came back out there?
The central player in Los Angeles before Mickey got out here was Jack Dragner. Jack Dragner has been described. They used to call them Mustache Pete's, the old
Right.
world style mob boss. And Jack controlled almost everything that went on in Los Angeles. There was an Irish component, but they were much smaller, and Jack tolerated them. But when Benny Seigel came out here, known to your fans, of course, as Bugsy, but I always referred to him in my books as Benny because that's what everybody called him that really knew him.
Nobody called him Bugsy to his face.
Never.
Right.
And so there was a guy out here also, Tony the Hat Cornero, and he, even though he should have been working full time for Dragner, he cooperated somewhat with Benny when he came out. Mickey came out here when Lansky sent him. It was Meyer Lansky. Early on,
he sent Bugsy. He sent Bugsy as well, didn't he?
Yes.
Okay.
But he sent Mickey to watch Bugsy. He didn't trust him entirely. It was Mickey's job. Now, when Mickey got out here, the local newspapers and the police, they referred to Mickey as, Bugsy's shadow, But you know what? He was watching, he was doing, he was starting to do stick-up jobs, he would go. I mean, one night he went to a club and, he stuck up the people for, their wallets and jewelry. And one of them was Betty Grable.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so years later, when he ran into her, she would always joke with him. But when at the scene, Flora Bell Muir, Flora Bell was a reporter that hung around with Mickey. But anyway, Grable is reported to have whispered in Mickey's ear and said, "Don't worry, we're insured."
So I want to ask you, Brad. So like you say, Jack Dragner's pretty much he's the big man in town, but he doesn't have any backing from a syndicate like Bugsy Seigel did. The big families in New York. But he was related.
Go ahead.
Was he related to the Lucchese family in New York, Dragner?
Not as a relative, but
okay.
The Lucchese family was certainly aware of them. But who was more aware of him was Johnny Roselli.
Right, Handsome Johnny.
Handsome Johnny, who I think the real name was Felipe Sacco. I
Something to that. Yeah, anyway. He grew up here. He actually, when he came to Italy with his family, he grew up here in East Boston. True story. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. You're right. Dragner didn't have the backing. Dragner was very independent because LA was diverse and widespread and, didn't have the infiltration that Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, Boston had.
Right.
They were organized big cities. LA's structure as a city, the way it is now, is all spread out all over the place. And also Los Angeles, at the time Mickey started coming out, when he came out in the 30s, was way behind economically or structurally the look and feel of a city like Philly or Boston. LA was LA, it was different. And so it was easy for them to work their way in, to take over all of Dragner's operations. Now, Dragner wasn't sitting back and just saying, okay. I mean, he hated these guys. I mean, he must have put 5 or 6 hits on Mickey easily and Mickey was lucky, really lucky, that he didn't get killed because they were always trying to kill him. I mean,
I want to ask you,
Dragner had a temper. I mean, he was no
right. He was no pushover, but he was portrayed by the syndicate as like a Mickey Mouse type of gangster.
Yes, you're right. That was his portrayal, but yet he controlled almost all of Los Angeles County. When Bugsy first came out, this was the guy who was in charge. Luciano, was associated with Dragner, but Luciano backed Mickey and Bugsy. Right. He told Bruno to leave them alone. Let them do what they're doing. There's room for both of them. And they tried for a while, the Jewish mob guys, to ingratiate themselves, and a lot of them were friends. They were friends, and what they had in common, where they went to work in common, is when they saw that there was money in the movie business. And they made friends with Louis Mayer, Jack Warner, Harry Cohn, and supplied their own police force for them. And that was his, Bugsy's first substantial contact was the Warner family, and then Louis Mayer, and they were two of the most powerful people. And George Raft, who people may recall is one of our great actors of the time.
Scarface.
But he was one of the boys. He grew up with some of these guys, so he was amenable to helping them out. He made sure also Harry Cohn, who I think Cohn was Columbia, was accessible to Bugsy. So they had a lot of cooperation from the movie business also. Sam Giancana was involved. Roselli, used to say he's got them all in his pocket, but it didn't turn out quite that way,
I want to ask you, because from what I've read and what I've looked at, Mickey Cohen, they tried to assassinate him 11 times. Is that right?
That sounds about right. Could have been 11 times. I mean, the number of times, it depends upon the reference you go to. But yeah,
Right.
that sounds about right.
I mean, he slept with angels, that guy. I mean, so go ahead.
The worst hit, where they blew up half of his house. He happened to be on the other side of the house, and one side of his house blew up. I mean, that was some job. But the only time he got clipped was on Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. Let's talk a little bit about the battle for Sunset Strip. Let's talk about July 20th, 1949. Sherry's Restaurant, located at 9039 Sunset Boulevard. Talk about that night. Maybe you can take it from there.
Okay, sure. It's hard to envision what the Sunset Strip was, because nothing like that will ever come again. This was incredible nightlife, clubs, restaurants, and the movie people hobnobbed with the mob people. They were there together every night out on the town. Now, the Sunset Strip was not part of Los Angeles. It was controlled by the corrupt sheriff, Eugene Biscalis. You've probably seen pictures. He loved to get on his white horse in a parade with his cowboy outfit and everything. But he was in charge. He was the sheriff, and he was in charge of the Sunset Strip. Anyway, that night at Sherry's, didn't start at Sherry's. It started at a Continental Cafe, which Mickey owned. And they met there, and then they went over to Sherry's. And he also had met earlier with Artie Samus, who was a huge power broker in the state of California, at a place called the Chirachka Cafe. But anyway, they get over to Sherry's, and Floribel Muir, the reporter for she worked for the Hearst papers, I think it was the Herald. And she even joked when she saw, Detective Harry Cooper outside, and there was a guy from the police force, Sergeant Daryl Murray. And everything to her was, she knew who everything was and everything that was going on, because to the insiders, it was all kind of a joke, because the battle was only in the newspapers. Right. There wasn't an ongoing until this night. And she actually said to Harry Cooper and Daryl Murray, "What are you standing out here for? What are you trying to do? Get yourself shot?"
She's psychic. She's psychic.
And she thought, what's the chance? Because everybody, all the cops, were out and everything. And he's got these two tails. He's got a Fed tail. He's got but it was a rough night. Also, it's not like now, where a restaurant or a club on the Sunset Strip is owned by, four guys sitting, in somewhere in Connecticut who invested money and put up, $20 million. Sherry's was owned by a retired New York City detective named Barney Ruditsky. I mean, you got to be a tough guy in those days to run a place.
And just so my audience knows, Brad, we're talking, like I said, July 20th, 1949. Seigel gets assassinated in June of 47. So Mickey's number one. He's the top dog. So this is a big deal. To whack him is a pretty big deal.
That's right. At this time, Mickey was in charge.
Right.
And it made sense. There were a lot of reasons, that have been speculated as to why they went after him at that particular time. But it's all speculation. I mean, any number of people. I mean, it could have been another Jack Dragna hit. A lot of things, a lot of reasons.
Right. He had a lot of enemies, including cops wanted him dead.
Yes, absolutely, no question about it. There were cops who wanted him dead, but by the same token, there were plenty of cops on the payroll.
Right.
I say plenty, enough to offer him protection. That his places weren't pinched. He owned a lot of stores and stuff in it. Anyway, to finish a little more on Sherry's, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
He was sitting inside, giving an interview to a Los Angeles Times reporter named Ed Meager. And there was a camera guy there taking pictures and everything. And it was like it was a regular night out in the town. And they weren't expecting it until they all went outside. His his one of Mickey's closest friends, Nettie Herbert, showed up and, was talking, and, it was just a regular night till they all went outside.
What time was this, Brad, when they came outside?
When they came out, it was probably, the times differ. It was probably between 3 and 4 a.m.
Wow.
About the exact time, is debatable. Mickey hit the pavement. There were a lot of shots fired. As I said, it came from Bing Crosby had a building across the street, and they were like deer slugs, size of $50. Wow. Started to go through the windows at Sherry's. Now, the reporter, Flora Bell Muir, hadn't gone outside yet. She thought they were throwing rocks. And so the hat check girl yelled, Sally Ventura, something about those bastards are throwing rocks in here and all. They didn't realize they were getting shot at until the piano player, her name was Margaret Padula, she got clipped in the ear and realized these are bullets. The detective Cooper really got nailed. He got shot a few times in the stomach. It was a mess when they were outside. And then Nettie Herbert, Mickey's friends, got really hit outside and went down on the pavement. And Mickey got hit in the shoulder. And Dee David, who was an actress who had been with them earlier at Mickey's house, she got shot in the rear, but it hit a kidney and messed up her intestines. And it was a big hit for those days. It was a big hit.
Amazing. A very sensational assassination attempt. So nobody was ever arrested for this. And so I'm sure you know that Jimmy the Weasel Fradiano said he made some comments later on, years later.
Yeah, Fradiano did a lot of talking about Mickey years later. I'm trying to think who he tried to lay it off on years later.
Was it Frank the Bump? Frank the Bump?
Everybody used to say Frank Bompansero did it, but it could have been because Bompansero once did go into Mickey's haberdashery and blow the front of the face off one of Mickey's guys.
That was Hookie. Was that Hookie?
Say again?
Was that Hookie that they killed at the haberdashery?
Hookie Rothman. Yeah. Yeah. Boy, you know your stuff, Mike.
No, I don't. I'm just it's all smoke and mirrors. Have you ever heard of the two Tonys, the two gangsters?
Oh yeah, the two Tonys. Yeah, that was another one. Who? Let's see. They ran an operation. Everybody knew they were going to get it. I mean, they had tons of arrest records, and they didn't get any convictions. Fratiano said, that Jack Dradner was in on this.
Right.
The order came from Jack because the Tonys supposedly had robbed cash from the Flamingo Hotel.
Yes, and they left something behind, or somebody saw. No, they had a mask. Somebody saw them, so they were marked for death. No matter when they were done. They were done. Yeah, they marked. For my audience that don't know, they tried to rob the Flamingo, which they were successful, and they ended up getting caught. They didn't get caught by the police, but they got caught by the crook and nose guys, and they left this earth pretty quick.
Yeah, they got about $3,500 in cash from the Flamingo, which the guy that ran the local book, his name was High Goldbaum, and he saw them. I mean, that's how stupid. I mean, he saw them.
Right.
When they said who robbed you, he said, the Tonys were here. They robbed. It was. I'm trying to think of. Well, Fradiano was in on the hit, that's for sure, when they got the hit. And I'm trying to think who else. Leo Lips Masseri drove a second car. There was a guy named Battaglia who was involved. But anyway, the car pulled up with the two Tonys, and the the way I recall it, there was an author named Ovid Damaris who said that, Jimmy just slipped the gun out of his waistband, shoved it against Brancato's head, and pulled the trigger twice, and smashed his skull, and that was it, And then, to be sure, though, he hit him with a baseball bat, too.
For added measure.
Just in case.
Brad, I want to ask you, so this is 49, so I want to get to February 6th, 1950. For Jack Dragna, for a guy who they say was a Mickey Mouse kind of gangster, if he went to go try to shake somebody down for extortion of business, they would laugh at him. But supposedly, he was involved with Sherry's trying to kill Mickey in front of Sherry's, and as well as trying to blow up his house in 1950.
That's right. Yeah.
So for a guy like they say, who was a nobody, no name kind of guy, he was an independent gangster. Let's say he wasn't connected with the five families, and he did some damage.
He did do a lot of damage. Like I mentioned earlier. He was the boss, and he controlled Los Angeles. Even though he tried to operate on his own, he was a pain in the ass for these guys.
Right.
He wasn't a pushover. It wasn't like what's been represented in a lot of the books and everything, that he was ineffectual. He was just old-fashioned. That doesn't mean he's ineffectual. I mean, I had a lot of old cars. They were old-fashioned, but they weren't ineffectual. This guy knew what he was doing.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jack Dragna respected Bugsy Seigel when he was alive. Then Mickey took over, and he hated Mickey Cohen.
Yes, that's true. He never took a liking to Mickey. Even before Bugsy was killed.
Yeah, they hated each other.
They didn't get along. Because Mickey, unlike the other mob guys, wanted his name in the paper all the time.
Right. Mickey was, for my audience to get maybe a comparison. Mickey Cohen back then was like like John Gotti, like the 80s and 90s. He was, like you say, the celebrity gangster. If there was a camera, he wanted to be in front of it. And I said in my intro that he was in over 1,000, covers on newspapers all over the world, pretty much.
So much so that Mickey was friends with Hearst because he sold so many newspapers for Hearst. He actually met him and became friends. When Hearst's daughter was kidnapped, he called Mickey.
Right.
Mickey was a true celebrity in the sense of how our country creates celebrities. He was a star in Los Angeles, self-created.
City of Lights, perfect for him.
Yes, it was. And his friends. If I went down his list of friends, he was buddies with Errol Flynn.
Wow.
Errol Flynn used to go to Rondelli's all the time with Mickey. Mickey had a bunch of friends. Marilyn Monroe used to date one of Mickey's boys. Mickey hobnobbed with all the celebrities. It was an endless, parade of people. It was, after all. I always joke around because the original sign said Hollywood Land, but that's what it is. It's Hollywood Land.
Right. Brad, you mentioned Rondelli's. Was there another assassination attempt there too?
Not an assassination attempt. This guy, Jack, but by the way, Mickey was friends with Robert Mitchum, Sammy Davis Jr., and the writer Ben Hecht. But the night at Rondelli's was just a night out on the town for Mickey and his boys. That they were just having a great night. Mickey had his dog there with him. They arrived there. Mickey had his new girlfriend. He had an 18-year-old girlfriend just under the limit or over the limit. And he was with his boys. He was with Georgie Piscatelli, Sam Losigno, and this guy, Roger Leonard, and the stripper, Candy Barr, and her manager, Joe DiCarlo, was there. But anyway, the guy that got hit was Jack Whalen. And he thought he was a tough guy, you know, but he picked the wrong night at the wrong time. You know, he walked up to this guy, Tony Reno, who was in a phone booth, you know, and he said, where are them two friends of yours, them two Dagos or something, you know, talking like that, you know, where are the Dago, you know, and it was a mess, you know. I mean, Whalen hit Georgie at the table. He came over. He claimed that he owed him some money or something. I don't, you know, could have been any, but that's all you have to do. You hit one of Mickey's boys, you're dead.
Yeah, you're done. You're done. It's over.
They were all sitting there. Everyone at Mickey's table had a gun, you know, and Whalen took took a slug in the head. He got one above his right eye. And it was a 38 special, you know, those tiny 2-barrel things, 2-inch barrel. Little guns they used to use, you know, because you could put them, you know, in your belt or in your pocket, or, you know, it was easy. And the funny part, to show you how Mickey controlled the city, the people who ran delis didn't call the cops for 45 minutes. They waited till everybody left.
I love it.
Then they cleaned up the room. And the funniest part of it, Joey Bishop was probably there. He was probably there, but he swore 2 times at 2 different trials. And he was a good friend of Mickey's, Joey Bishop.
Yes, very good. Yes, I just did a show on Joey Bishop a couple of weeks ago.
No kidding. I mean, I tried to get him. He was alive when I wrote my book. He didn't want any part of.
Yeah, he was very bitter and angry at the end. Very bitter. Yeah, borderline. Yeah, Rick Lurtzman. I'll put you in touch with him. He wrote the book. He's a great guy.
Anyway, Joey at his second trial testified that he was so tired from playing golf that he couldn't go out for dinner. He claims he played 45 holes of golf. That's like 2 18s and a 9, right?
2 and a half.
My math, Mike.
Yeah, I don't know. You're asking the wrong guy. You got the wrong guy for that. Wrong guy.
2 18s. He said, how could I have? I was too tired. But yet that night, Joey showed up at a gig, you know, on the Strip. He had a job, so he couldn't have been that tired. He claims he was not in rondellis. You know, and it's twice he testified in the trial. But by the way, when Mickey eventually went to prison, most of the letters he got, personal letters, were from Joey Bishop.
Oh, wow. Oh. Who knew?
You know, yeah, I mean, that's something. I mean, it's something unusual. Yeah, Mickey had a bunch of unusual friends. I mean, Mickey was friends with Richard Nixon. I mean, he has a strange life. It's in.
I want to ask you real quick. You mentioned all these celebrities, Brad, real quick. What was his relationship with Frank Sinatra?
They were buddies. You know, Frank Sinatra and Mickey Cohen were friends. I mean, when Ava Gardner was on the outs with Frank, he came to Mickey for help. You know, he wanted seriously, he wanted advice. He felt Mickey was so much of a friend. You know, it was a strange kind of relationship.
He also helped out Judy Garland.
And
with her husband?
My memory.
With her husband, I guess he was giving her a hard time, so he sent a couple of goons over there to straighten him out.
It's certainly possible. I mean, Mickey was known for, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. You know, I'm thinking of a night though. Well, Sid Luft got into a fight once. We're talking about Sid Luft, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. He was a hothead. He was a hothead.
Yeah, he got into a fight somewhere, and they made sure to let him know that you know, he better cut it out, you know.
Yeah. You don't mess with Mickey and his boys. I mean, back then, like I said, he was number one. It's like messing with like Al Capone. What are you, crazy? You know.
Yeah. By the way, Capone was a mentor for Mickey because Mickey spent some time with the Capone family. Mickey had the full education. By the time he got to Los Angeles, He was past college. He already had a PhD.
Wow.
He spent time with the Capone family, and he
Amazing.
became friends with Maddie.
Wow.
And he used to go to the house, for Sunday dinner and everything. And he must have been. This is one of the things that I learned, researching and writing about him.
Real quick, Brad.
A likable guy.
We got about 5 to 8 minutes left. I want to ask you. You mentioned that PhD, and he wasn't very good at math. How did Mickey Cohen divide money between his henchmen?
Well, yeah, he is purportedly said to have counted it out, by hand, like one for you, one for you,
right.
One for you. He didn't add it up. He just could see the number, the stacks and
stacks of hundreds, stacks of hundreds. One for you, one for me. Stacks of 50s, one for you. Because he couldn't do the numbers in his head, so he just
he was not educated. But he did when he became older by meaning in his 30s. He hired a tutor to help him with his diction. He wanted to be more accepted by the Hollywood community. He bought a writing stable in Burbank, and he took English writing lessons. And he had the outfit, he had the pants, and the writing crop and everything. He wanted to be, thought of as a celebrity who was cultured.
Right, and playing polo with the boys at the polo club.
Yeah.
Brad, I want to ask you real quick. In 1957, Johnny Stompanato, one of his friends and former bodyguards, begins dating Lana Turner, and obviously we know what happens. What did Mickey Cohen think that happened to Johnny Stompanato?
Oh, Mickey was livid and upset and everything, and he ran up into the police station. He knew the daughter did it, but he couldn't, he could never get the cooperation. He said, Johnny was built like an athlete.
Right.
Johnny was a big guy, and to have gotten the best of him, the way in which it was I'm sorry. He said the daughter could not have done it. I'm sorry. I said he knew the daughter didn't do it.
Right.
He said it would have been impossible because Johnny was a big guy, that she would get the best of him. In his mind, it had to have been the mother. It had to have been Lana, and he had to have had, he couldn't have been watching or anything. I believe he was carrying some dry cleaning or something, and they were in the kitchen. But Mickey didn't believe for a minute. What was her name? Cheryl Crane?
Crane. Yes, Cheryl.
Cheryl Crane. Yeah, he didn't believe it for a second. He never believed that for a second.
What did he do about it? Did he ransack an apartment? His goons? I could be wrong.
No, I that sounds familiar. You mean
there was some type of book or something they were looking for in his apartment, I guess. But he released some letters in the newspapers.
I'm trying to recall. You're right. There were some letters.
Love letters between Johnny Stompanato and Lana Turner to prove that they were in love, and he would never beat her because they said he beat her up and blah 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 blah, and that's why she stabbed him, or the daughter. But they had an argument. The daughter, he ran into the knife supposedly. By accident. He was turning her. He's in the closet or something, and he ran out, and she was standing there with the knife. The daughter, supposedly, like I say, but there's so many reports, and I think Jerry Giesler was involved from day one, so they squashed everything.
Yeah. I think that they went into the. I'm trying to think where it was. Mickey was staying then in some motel in Westwood, Del Capri Motel. But you're right about the letters. They write about the letters that they were Lana Turner's love letters written from Europe to Stompanato. If I recall correctly.
Yeah, you're correct. You're correct. Let's see. So he gets called to testify. Was it the Kefauver or the McClellan hearings? I forget which one.
Both.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So obviously, Bobby Kennedy, William Parker, these guys were out to get him. And talk about how he went down.
Well, he went down like so many other mob leaders. He went down for tax evasion. And he unfortunately didn't keep any kind of books. He didn't have a proper set of fake books. If he had a proper set of fake books, maybe they would have had a harder time. But he didn't believe in that. He was warned about that by some higher ups when he started, making a lot of money. But he had so many discrepancies, and so many people testified on his behalf. I mean, at one trial, Red Skelton testified, Jerry Lewis testified. By the way, I had another thought about the letters. The letters contradicted Lana Turner's statements that she had made to the police. See, you're right about what you said, totally right. Like, she said that she had little interest in Stompanato, that he had forced, the relationship and all that stuff, and it wasn't welcome. But I just found a quote where she wrote, "I miss you, want you, and ache for you. I'm your woman, and I need you, my man."
Wow.
And she used the expressions daddy, honeypot, papito, gitano, gianito, which in those days was pretty hot stuff.
Yeah. There was I could be wrong, but there was some type of audio of them making love, having love, making sex or whatever.
I'm sure there was. Mickey and his boys, Johnny was known for that, and Georgie Piscatelli. They had the room set up with hidden cameras behind a mirror. Wow. And one time they blackmailed Lana Turner with the things, and I think her attorney at the time was Lou Blau, and they paid off to get the movie, the tape. No, he I wouldn't be surprised if he had heaps of Johnny and Lana.
Real quick, Brad, because we're getting close. Did Mickey try to extort or what do you call it, Marilyn Monroe?
I believe he did. I'm trying to think of the circumstances. He got extortion money from everyone that he could. Georgie Piscatelli was like Marilyn's escort around town. And there are supposedly recordings of, Marilyn talking about Mickey's extortion rackets. But because Mickey had tapes of her having sex with both Georgie and Sam, who worked for him, Sam Losigno. So the thing, now we're getting to conspiracy stuff, but the reason they wanted to leverage Marilyn, they thought Marilyn could get info from JFK because the Jewish mob, was interested in what he was going to do with Israel. And so that was one of the motivations, purportedly, why Cohen wanted to blackmail Marilyn.
Interesting.
And he did have a link, but I don't know if he ever got any information from Marilyn.
Real quick, Brad, for my audience, Mickey Cohen had a really, really, really bad case of OCD.
The worst.
It actually helped him out because it saved his life at the haberdashery.
This is true. That story is true, because if he hadn't gone to wash his hands, which he did multiple times a day, he would have gotten shot along with Hookie Rothman. Mickey would wear a suit once. He didn't want to wear a suit a second time. He had a guy that made suits for him, on the strip, and he also owned a haberdashery, so he didn't want for clothing. But when he went to a restaurant, if he went to the washroom, he used up every towel that was available. And when he'd be sitting at a table, he always needed extra napkins. He took showers an hour or two at a time sometimes, and he really had a problem. When he was older, he had a condo in Brentwood, and the manager of the condo, owner, said to him, you're going to have to pay more for water because I can't supply you with the hot water you need, all that kind of stuff. He really had a problem.
That's classic. Beautiful. And just so my audience knows, in 1950, when supposedly Jack Dragna blew up Mickey's house, he was the one thing he was pretty much really upset about was because they blew up his suits.
It's probably true. Because his wife slept on the other side of the house. They blew up Mickey's bedroom. And yeah, they blew up his suits. That probably pissed him off.
Yeah, that's his identity. That's his identity. It's a character.
It's impossible to emphasize what a dapper dresser the guy was.
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, really was immaculately dressed. You would never know the guy was a mob guy. I used to joke with my friends, he looked like somebody's accountant, He didn't look like a mob guy. I mean, he was short. I mean, he wasn't a handsome guy, but he wasn't an ugly guy. But when you put those clothes on a guy, and also he had, his pinky rings and all that stuff, the guy, when he walked into his room, everybody looked up. Who's that? Who's that?
Didn't he tell Harry Cooper, Harry Cooper, you see him in that famous picture with him and Mickey, he was what was he, a cop or he's assigned to watch Mickey Cohen? But he looked like a gangster. Mickey said, "You can't wear these clothes. You're a cop. You look like a cop." No, I'll take it to my haberdasher. We'll suit you up. And if you ever seen that famous picture of them two coming walking out, they both look like gangsters to me.
Okay.
I mean, he was a cop, whatever he was. So let's see. Was it July or June 29th, 1976? Mickey dies of stomach cancer. Brad, what did he have for family? Did he have an estate? Was he worth any money when he died?
Unfortunately, the records indicate that the money was all gone. There was no money anywhere to be found. Now, you could easily make the case he had a sister. You could easily make the case that over the years he funneled cash out, but nobody knows that, to who he funneled the cash out. Mickey was the kind of guy who would go around town and he'd walk into a restaurant and he'd see Red Skelton and he'd say, "I need $5,000. And he'd get the $5,000. Everybody gave him money when he asked for it, which is uncanny that he would end up with no money, no estate, no nothing.
Yeah, awful.
But it's also ironic, though, he died of, health problems instead of bullets, after living the life he lived. Also, he died of a misdiagnosis, though, because he was told for years that he had an ulcer. It was misdiagnosed. I mean, he had incipient stomach cancer, and it eventually caught up with him. And by the time they diagnosed the stomach cancer at UCLA, it was too late. For years, he treated it as if he had, gastritis or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's he was one of the, he was a very rare breed, and for his height, for his stature, I mean, he carried a big stick, and very feared. And we haven't even scratched the surface. I could talk to you for hours about Mickey Cohen. The corruption, all the politicians. He had the DA's office in his pocket. He had everybody in his pocket for a little guy, and
his contacts went right up to the president of the United States. He had contacts in Washington D.C. because he knew the big reporters. He was friends with Drew Pearson, who was one of the top reporters of the time. He could get messages to LBJ, and he did. But LBJ screwed him. Ultimately, he was looking for a pardon. He was still in jail then.
And he got in trouble on the Mike Wallace show when he talked about William Parker. That didn't.
He said some very unflattering things.
He called him a drunk and a hack or whatever he called him.
We called him every kind of name there was.
A degenerate.
I got a little bit of a more difficult time than probably somebody else would have, because I have a police chief in Los Angeles, California, who happens to be a sadistic degenerate. This man has no respect for decency. He's a known alcoholic. He's been disgusting, and he's a known degenerate. In other words, he's a sadistic degenerate of the worst type.
You hit on the thing that I have in common with Mickey Cohen. We were both interviewed by Mike Wallace. I was interviewed by Mike when I was in junior high school.
Wow. Yeah, he's from Brookline. He's from around the corner over here. He's from Brookline, Massachusetts.
I didn't know that.
He grew up in Brookline. Wow, that's funny. Imagine that.
That show that Mickey did with Mike Wallace was
Yeah.
unbelievable. Never been done before.
Yeah, he said, for my audience out there who don't know what we're talking about, he pretty much said, I didn't kill anybody that didn't deserve it.
Yes, that's
Quote.
right. That was his classic line. He always said that. He said that on Merv. When Mickey got out of jail, Merv Griffin, who was a friend of his, invited him on the Merv Griffin show. And Mickey said the same thing. He said, I never killed a guy that didn't deserve it.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. The life and times of Mickey Cohen. Brad, this has been great. For my audience out there, please visit BradleyLewis.org and BradleyLewis.com to check out some of his amazing books. He's an amazing celebrity biographer, and he has a new book out right now called Nobody's Perfect, 4 50s Comedies, which is going to be a huge hit on Amazon. Check it out on Amazon. And Brad, what can I say? This has been great. I've been wanting to do a show about Mickey for a while, and when I looked up, I typed into the machine, expert on Mickey Cohen. Here comes Bradley Lewis's name.
Mike, you're terrific. Anytime, call me.
You got it. I will call you on that.
But listen, when I'm in Boston, though, I want a nice bowl of chowder.
You got it. You got it. It's on me. It's on me.
But I also want a nice Italian sub to go with it.
We got plenty. Hopefully, we'll be when you do come out here. This virus will be gone, and everybody will be back. We'll be like the Roaring '20s again before Mickey Cohen showed up.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mike. This was terrific.
Thank you so much, Brad. We'll talk to you soon. Be safe.
You too. Be well.
Thank you, man. Take care. Bye-bye. The first show of the new year with Bradley Lewis. Please visit BradleyLewis.org and BradleyLewis.com. He's got some great
books
on there about Mickey Cohen, Uncle Miltie, Milton Berle. His son wrote the book. I believe Bradley wrote it for Milton Berle's son. So go check that one out. BradleyLewis.org, BradleyLewis.com. Great interview about Mickey Cohen, LA's most notorious gangster. And we really didn't even scratch the surface on Mickey Cohen. He was in Atlanta prison. He was in an Atlanta prison, I believe the late 50s, and a guy just had a pipe behind and just wheeled the hell out of him. And he really messed him up. He cracked his skull and other things, and was pretty much paralyzed the rest of his life. And he died in 1976. They say of natural causes, and he had stomach cancer as well. But he was pretty banged up. But he had an amazing life. He left an amazing legacy. Gangster Squad with Sean Penn, if you've seen that. A lot of big stars in that film. Mickey Cohen had a major role. Sean Penn played Mickey Cohen. Check out that movie if you get some time. And that's it, guys. We'll see you again next week. That's it. Again, subscribe to the YouTube channel, guys.